Welcome to my channel. One of my old crosscut sleds has become warped, so it's time to build a new one. I intend to use the same dimensions on the new crosscut sled, which is 80 centimeters wide and 60 centimeters long. However, the front and back pieces will be slightly higher than I had before. For the bottom, I use a 1.9 centimeter thick MDF board, and for the front and back pieces, a pine plank measuring 4.5 by 17 centimeters. I have a piece of MDF that is 60 centimeters wide and 150 centimeters long. I cut the MDF so that I get a piece that is 80 centimeters long. It's always a bit cumbersome with larger boards on a small table saw. I'm hanging the new sled in the same place as the old one, so I drill holes for the hooks with a 25mm drill bit. I round off the edges of the holes because the rounding fits the hooks better. Good thing it fit. At least then I would have measured correctly and wouldn't have to drill again. I continue with the front and back pieces. I cut the pine plank measuring 4.5 by 17 centimeters into two pieces that are 80 centimeters long. Since pine is a relatively soft material, I plan to use a piece of MDF on the back piece. This will give me a harder wear surface. I had a piece that was exactly 80 centimeters long. I only cut the width of this to 16 centimeters. Luckily, I found perfectly straight pieces of pine for the front and back pieces, so I don't have to do anything with the back piece before gluing the MDF piece. Time to adjust the height of the front and back pieces. I set the fence to 16 centimeters and cut one side of the back piece. Since I know that the side with the MDF board is completely flat, I place it face down against the saw table. Then I move the fence to 15 centimeters and cut the other side of the back piece. Now I also cut one side of the front piece. It's time to glue the rails to the underside of the bottom plate. I put some thin slats at the bottom of the tracks to raise the rails a little higher than the saw table and use the same rails that were on the old sled. I made these from a polyethylene sheet. The reason I use this material is that it does not expand or shrink when the humidity in the air changes. Before, I used oak, but these always expanded when the humidity in the room rose. Sometimes the sled slid with very high friction, and sometimes it even got stuck in the tracks. Since I started making rails from polyethylene, there have been no problems. Now the glue has dried. Even if you roughen the polyethylene surface before gluing, the glue will not adhere to the polyethylene properly. Therefore, you also need to screw the rails into the base plate. The tracks in the saw table on my Metabo 254M are not a standard width. They are narrower, which means I need to use quite small screws. That's why I pre-drill with a drill bit that is only 1 millimeter. Since I'm reusing the old rails, I don't need to make any new countersinks. These are already present at each hole in the rails. When I install the screws, it is very important that I do not tighten them too much so that the rails expand in thickness. If I tighten the screws too much, the sled will not slide well in the tracks, and in the worst case, will not slide at all. The sled slides exactly as it should without any sideways play. So far, so good. Time to attach the front piece. When it comes to the front piece, it's not so important that it sits exactly straight. I attach the front piece with a pair of clamps and then screw it in place. As you can see in the video, I have made a mark between the rails. This mark is to prevent me from putting a screw exactly where the saw blade passes. Once the front piece is in place, I place the sled on the saw table and make a cut that ends about 15 centimeters from the back of the sled. The sled will be equipped with a T-track at the top of the back piece. Therefore, I mill a groove that fits the T-track. On the lower front edge of the back piece, I round off the edge so that sawdust does not collect on the lower edge and prevent you from placing the piece you are sawing directly against the back piece. I also round off the outer edges of the back piece. It makes the sled a little nicer to hold when there are no sharp edges. Time to assemble the T-track. I don't use any glue in case I need to change the back piece or make a new sled in the future. Instead, I just attach it with fairly long screws. Once the T-track is in place, it's time to attach the back piece. I temporarily attach the back piece with 2 clamps. Then I attach the back piece with just 1 screw on one side so that the back piece can be adjusted. I adjust the back piece using a set square. To make this easier, I have cut a piece to the same thickness as the saw blade. I also check that the back piece is exactly 90 degrees to the bottom plate. So far, everything looks good. There are several different methods to ensure that the saw cut is made at an exact 90-degree angle. I used to use the 5-cut method, but today I only use the 1-cut method. I have cut a piece of MDF where I have ensured that the lower right corner has an exact 90-degree angle. I place the MDF piece on the sled with the correct corner to the right and against the back piece. Next, I cut the MDF piece in half. To check if the saw cut is at the right angle, I place both halves against the back piece and turn the right half over. If there is a gap at the top or bottom when I hold the pieces pressed against the back piece, I need to adjust the back piece. Today I was lucky. It's not that common for the angle to be completely correct from the start. I also checked both MDF pieces with 2 different set squares and everything looks good. Time to attach the back cover with 6 more screws. The drill I use doesn't have a large countersink, and the screw heads are quite wide. Therefore, I follow up with a wider countersink after drilling. As you noted, I attached the back piece 8 centimeters from the edge of the bottom plate. That was because I planned to use the old handles on the new sled. Now I have cut the old handles apart from the old sled and will glue them onto the new one. To make sure the new handles are securely attached, I also attach them with a few screws from below and above. Time to start with the stop block. I take a piece that is 8 times 2.7 centimeters and cut the length to 10 centimeters. Then I take a leftover piece of the shelf and cut it to 10 by 14.9 centimeters. Now I have the pieces needed for the stop block. Next, I drill 2 holes 5.1 centimeters from one long side and 2.5 centimeters from each short side. The screws I use are MMA. To prevent them from getting stuck in the holes, I drill with an 8.5 millimeter drill bit. I attach the piece that is 10 times 8 centimeters to the T-track and attach the piece that is 10 times 14.9 centimeters to it with 2 screws. The reason I chose the measurement of 14.9 centimeters is because I want to have a little gap between the stop block and the bottom plate. The height of the bottom plate is 15 centimeters. I also attach the old plexiglass cover to the sled with 2 screws. This is good because you don't get sawdust in your eyes when using the sled. Now the sled is completely finished. Sure, you can install T-tracks in the bottom plate, but since a T-track is 12 millimeters thick and the bottom plate is only 19 millimeters, there won't be that much material to screw in. Sure, you can use a thicker bottom plate, but then the cutting height will also decrease. That's why I choose to have the sled just as it is. With the current thickness of the bottom plate, I have a cutting height of just over 6 centimeters.